So this is everything that I was wearing, right down to the inReach satellite tracker, the moment I finished my Iron Butt Grand Ride. Now I've had a lot of questions about what gear I was using, what kind of seat I had, so what I thought I would do is I'd break down just what it is that's under all of this bulk that I wore to keep me adequately warm at 19 degrees Fahrenheit up here on the Colorado Plateau. So let's dig into it. All right, so I'm gonna try to bang through this pretty quickly. I learned something very valuable in all of my outdoor adventures and through hikes and deployments to Antarctica, and that is the value of layering. But not only that, it's important what type of fabric those layers are made out of. If you try to layer cotton, you're not gonna do well in a cold environment. So my layer of choice for my base layer, this is what I'm wearing here, this is what I wore on the ride, this is merino wool. It's my favorite fabric to wear as a base layer because it's comfortable, it wicks moisture well, and also it doesn't get stinky. You can sweat in it all day and it never gets gross and stinky. I wore a merino wool shirt for 4 straight months on the Pacific Crest Trail, the same shirt every day, and it never once got stinky. So huge praise for merino. This is Icebreaker brand, and this is what I was wearing as my base layer on my Grand Iron Butt ride. So let's get to layer number 2. All right, so as you can probably imagine, my secondary layer is also a merino layer. This is a slightly thicker count merino layer that I got as a finisher shirt for a race I ran in 2014. I think it's made by Patagonia, but I love it. It gives me just that little bit of extra warmth and protection I need, and this is exactly the shirt I was wearing during my ride under all those layers. So it's really key to have just a second, easy to throw on and off layer that's about double the thickness of your base layer. So let's move on to the third layer. All right, so for my third layer, this is where I switched to fleece. So this is a thin fleece layer. It's a shell that I got as part of a research expedition, actually. It's really funny. It's actually a lady's fleece, so it fits me better. So this is what I wore, but I put this on somewhere around mile 800 on the ride as the sun was starting to set and I was just starting to get a little chilled. This little bit of extra fleece, it's perfect. It just gives you that little bit of extra warmth. And so I always try to bring a thin fleece layer like this. So right now we're at 3 layers. We got the merino, the secondary heavier merino, and now fleece. So on top of this is where I started to really bulk up. All right, so this was the 4th layer that I was wearing through most of the last 2 hours of the ride when it started to get really cold. And what this is, it might look kind of awkward, like it's not really meant to be a coat, and that's because this is actually the liner that goes with my riding coat. So I have a Revit brand Tornado coat, and this is the liner that zips into the inside. Now it's a pain to get it zipped in, so whenever I do wear this, I just wear it as a coat and just put my coat over the top of it, and it works perfectly fine. It's supposed to be waterproof as well. I haven't really tested that because I also have a rain jacket, but it is super warm. So anytime I get cold, like in the mountains of Colorado, or if it's really cold night riding, I will put this on under my coat, and it does the trick. So let's get to the 5th layer. All right, so as you probably guessed, my 5th layer is my riding coat. Now this is a Revit Tornado 3, I think, and I got this coat just because it was on sale and because I liked that it came with that single internal liner, so I didn't have to swap out different liners for different purposes. And I just liked it because it's also got lots of ventilation. It's a pretty simple coat. I could put the little back brace built right into the coat. So it's just a nice coat. Now this is my bulkier coat, but it's also the more sort of dynamic and adaptable coat. So I wear this coat when I'm going on like bigger rides, but it is warmer. I do also have a much thinner sort of summer coat that I usually just wear when I'm riding around town here. But this was my 5th layer and this was my riding coat. And normally with all of these layers, I would be toasty warm. However, in those last 50 miles from Cameron home, I got really chilled. And so I decided to put on my final layer, which I'll show you now. All right, so this is my final layer. This is an external rain shell. And what I like about having an external rain shell is I can just throw it on over everything if it starts raining. And in Colorado, or even here during monsoon season, you can go from beautiful bluebird skies to torrential downpours in a matter of minutes. So I like this solution as opposed to having like all these intricate internal waterproof layers or having a Gore-Tex coat, because Gore-Tex never really is truly waterproof. So I throw this guy on. Now what's cool about this layer is it's an incredibly good wind shell, but also has a little bit of bulk to it, so it's actually gives me like a little bit of extra warmth. Now the key to having all of this up here, this is my core, right? What I learned in Antarctica is if you can keep your core as warm as possible, it prevents your body from shunting heat away from your extremities. So 9 times out of 10, when I have cold fingers, it's not because my fingers are necessarily exposed to something really cold. It's because my core is getting cold and it's pulling heat away from my fingertips or my toes. So what I learned is that if I keep this part super toasty, roasty warm, my fingers will do much better. Now, of course, I still wore my heavy-duty gloves and used hand warmers, but we'll get to that. So this was everything I was wearing up top, and I can tell you right now, I am roasting in it right now in this garage, but it's also still movable. Like I don't feel like Ralphie in A Christmas Story. Like I can still, move around. It's definitely bulky, but this is everything that I wore, all 6 layers. So let's move down to the bottom. All right, so just like up top, the key to staying warm down below is to layer and layer with appropriate fabrics. So my go-to cold weather base layer down below is this pair of merino tights that I wear. Now obviously I'm not going commando under these, so I've got a pair of briefs on underneath, but these are really good for keeping my legs warm. Now my legs always kind of run a bit warm, so usually if I just wear these under my riding pants, I'm almost always good. However, on the grand ride towards the end when it was getting really cold, I did layer up. So let me show you the next layer. All right, so as you may have guessed, the next layer I had on over my tights is actually this thermal waterproof layer that is part of my riding pants. So these are the Tornado internal zip-in layer that goes with the pants, and they are supposedly for warmth and waterproof, although I've never really tested the waterproof part of it. They are extremely warm though. Now the downside of these pants is you can't wear them just as pants. You have to kind of zip them in. As you can see, they kind of just flop around. They don't really have a way to tie them down outside of the pants. And so when you do wear these, if you don't zip them in on the sides, they kind of get all bunched up and weird. So that is the one downside to them. So this is what I was wearing down below. Let me show you the next layer. All right, so moving on, as you probably guessed, my next layer is just my riding pants. So these are the Tornado 3s. I got these because I found them really cheap on a used forum. Somebody bought them and wore them once and didn't like them, so I picked them up for like less than half of normal cost. And I really like them because they have just enough protection in the knees and in the sides and enough ventilation that they make a good all-around riding pant. The downside to these pants is that they run small. So I'm a pretty standard build, like 32-inch waist, 155 pounds. Normally medium is more than enough for me. And so these are mediums and they are snug. So when I wear the thermal pants underneath, they're really tight. So it's kind of weird, like that a 32-inch waist is almost a large in these pants, but that's just how they size them. I don't know what that says about Americans' waists versus Europeans' waists, but we won't have that discussion right now. So on the night of my ride, even with all of this, I was still cold and I still wanted to keep all my sort of core warm. So I was already putting on that outer rain shell up top. And as you probably guessed, I have the companion pants that go with it. So let me show you what that looks like. All right, so these are the pants, and as you can see, they're massive. They're super big, but that's okay. I actually really like that because I can undo this Velcro here and actually put them on over my boots, which is fantastic. And they were cheap. So that is everything I was wearing. 6 layers on top, 4 layers down below. So let's talk about mitts and dome. All right, so these are my normal riding gloves. They're getting pretty beat up. The Revit brand, I don't even remember which style they are, but You know, seams are starting to come apart. They're definitely on their way out, but they're great for summer riding, mostly comfortable all the time. When I'm cold though, I switch over to these guys. Also Revit brand, but these are my super cold weather, bulky, waterproof, Gore-Tex, the whole deal. These were really expensive, several $100s, and they've still got the protection. I can't remember what the name of these gloves are, but they are fantastic. I think they're called the Stratos, if I remember correctly. But I absolutely love these when I know it's gonna be cold out. But in addition to these gloves, I still had hand warmers. I'm not gonna take these out because I don't wanna use them, but I had a single hand warmer in each glove that I just sort of held in my palm as I was riding, and that just gives me a little bit of extra warmth when I need it. So again, it was really cold. I don't have heated gloves and I don't have heated grips. So with these gloves and these hand warmers, that was all I needed. So up top, I just had a pretty standard kit. I just had a basic buff around my neck, like this. And then on top, under my helmet, I was wearing a very thin fleece beanie cap, just to give my head a little bit of extra warmth. Honestly, I didn't really need this, but I had it, and as I was going through stuff, I just threw it on because it gave me just a little bit extra warmth. So it's just nice because it's really small and it, you know, packs up super tiny, but it's fleece, so it's really warm. So that was what I had up top. That's what I had on my hands. The only other thing that I'd show you is what I had down at my feet. So these are my boots. They're getting pretty old. They're an old beat up brand of Revit as well. I don't actually know what kind of boots these are. Again, I got them on a used forum and they've been really good to me. They've treated me well. I can hike in them. So I want to say brand new. These are probably like $400, but I think I got them for $200. So I do like them. They got good protection and they're not super high like the real tall dual sport boots. The Discovery H2Os, that's what these are, Revit Discoveries. So down below, I also had on my tall socks. So these are my winter riding / winter running tall merino blend socks. And I really, really like these. They just give me that little bit of extra warmth down below. So with this combination of socks and boots and all the other layers I was wearing, my toes never got cold. So that's it. That's everything I was wearing the moment I walked into this ground and slumped on that floor behind us. All right, so before I end this video, I do want to talk about a couple of pieces of gear that people were asking me about. So first off is the pack. So this is the pack that I used. I got it just like a couple of days before the ride. It's a Moskomoto Wildland 8-liter pack, I believe. And what I really liked about it was that it has this like front pouch as well. So I carried my tracker as well as like some snacks and extra earplugs and just things that I wanted easy access to up front. But it also has a bladder. So I had the bladder tube coming and down like through my chest, and I could basically just like tuck it under my helmet and drink while I was riding, as opposed to trying to reach down to my tank bag and, you know, try to do it that way. This gave me access to water on the ride, which was really nice. It didn't like hurt my shoulders or anything like that, and it's very secure. So great pack. It does have a lot of different pockets in it, so you can organize it to some extent, just not quite as well as the tank bag. So this is also Moskomoto. This is my Nomax bag, which I also really like. The thing that convinced me to not go with this bag, given my previous experiences, is that I wanted free access to my gas tank. I just wanted completely unobstructed cockpit, we'll say. And with that bag, that doesn't really make it possible. And for 1,000 miles, I wanted as much space as possible to stretch out. Now, along those lines, something that I discovered on this ride is the GV engine guards make for great leg rests when you're just cruising along the highway. I can set my legs up on those guards and just cruise for hundreds of miles and just give my legs a rest. I felt like a total Harley rider with my legs up. It was great. One other thing that a lot of people were asking me about in the comments is the seat that I use. Now, I did make several videos a while back showing how I upgraded my seat, But if you didn't see those, basically I swapped out my seat with a Seat Concepts brand seat. So this was definitely pricey, but I will tell you, honestly, my review of this is that it's worth it. If you're gonna be doing any kind of long distance riding on your Himalayan, anything more than like 200 or 300 miles at a go, this is a lifesaver. I had already upgraded to the Royal Enfield Enduro seat, or whatever they call it, the touring seat. And even that, like, I took a 300-400 mile ride up to Colorado, and by the time I got there, my backside was so sore. This thing, I don't know what kind of magic foam they use in here, but never once on this ride did my backside get sore. In fact, the only thing that really got sore on the ride were my knees, just from kind of being bent all day. And that's why I was riding with them up on the crash bars for so long. So this seat, highly recommend. I know there's other brands out there that make equivalent seats, but it's worth it. And this is the standard size, not the tall. It's maybe a 1/4 inch taller than the factory seat, but it's close. And I got the semi-gripper top because I didn't want the full grip. I just kind of wanted to split the difference. And so I've been very happy with this seat. It's held up to quite a bit of abuse, and I definitely recommend it. So that is my seat for those that were asking. Moving on. Now this video is already too long, and I had this grand plan of kind of going through my overall reflections of the ride and talking about the highs and the lows and all of the little scenic vistas and all the good stuff on this ride. And really, I decided I just didn't want to do that. I'll give you the short Cliff Notes version. Basically, I tried to design a route that I knew would be the most ideal for a Himalayan, a bike that really only comfortably goes up to 70. So I picked secondary highways that went through some of the most scenic parts of Arizona and all the different ecosystems where there's also not very much traffic. You know, I averaged on the highway stretches probably about 60, 65. And then I still also had that really twisty mountain section, which slowed me way down. So I think overall it was a supreme loop. It was absolutely wonderful. The Coronado Trail, the very twisty mountain road that went up to 9,000 feet, was definitely my favorite part of the ride. But sunset across Navajo Nation was just absolutely breathtaking as well, as was sunrise over the Roosevelt Bridge. So there were a lot of really good highlights. I could spend an hour talking about it. I think the short answer is that I'm really glad I did it. I've been very jazzed about it. I might do it again someday, but definitely not for a while. I mean, I've got my cup runneth full. So I'm happy, I'm content, and I'm really glad I did it. I highly recommend it as an experience. But as you saw in the video, by the end, I was starting to become unsafe to ride. So the timing worked out. And now I'm in the process of putting all the documentation together. So I've got all my receipts printed and photographs, and you know, I've downloaded all the forms from Iron Butt Association, and I'm gonna fill all that stuff out and timestamp it and everything else. So I really enjoyed it. And I also really loved the fact that I was pinging from my inReach and that you guys could follow along. And I will say that, you know, I'm fairly content with how it performed. There were definitely a few spots where it missed an update, you know, it just didn't have good signal. But otherwise, yes, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I was able to put a video together for all of you. And yeah, I don't know what else to say other than it was quite a grand adventure, both figuratively and literally. So thank you so much. If you've got any other questions about my gear or about the pack or the inReach or my layering or the bike, how the bike performed, please do ask. I did just order a new chain and sprockets to replace on the bike because it definitely needs it, as well as it needs an oil change. So that's my next big task with the bike. But otherwise, I will sign off. So take care, be safe, and I will see you all in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.